Number 10. Cosmic Ghost Rider. What happens when Frank Castle becomes a Ghost Rider just as planet Earth is dying and there is no one left to avenge? Well, you get the brilliant and insane Cosmic Ghost Rider. This version of Frank Castle ended up teaming up with Galactus originally in order to try and take on Thanos, who threatened the existence of all life at the time as he tried to win the heart of Mistress Death. In the end, no one was left to serve but Thanos, and Cosmic Ghost Rider was driven mad by loneliness and heartbreak and being unable to die, so he eventually ended up joining Thanos anyways. He is as powerful as he is insane at this point and is a frighteningly cheerful version of Frank Castle, especially considering all of the horrors he's witnessed, especially when he was serving Thanos. Did some pretty bad stuff. Number 9. Annihilus. Annihilus is a somewhat lost being who was created in the negative zone on a planet known as Athros. He evolved from life spores that were left there and ended up mutating and growing to be a highly intelligent insectoid-like life form. He has been an enemy and ally to the Fantastic Four, depending on the circumstances, and he also once almost took over Asgard, managing to take on the Asgardian soldiers and even beat Thor. Thankfully, Odin stopped him before he could succeed. Poor Annihilus, I feel like he's so lost in life. Really needs a stronger purpose. Number 8. Iowa the Mungazoth. Hope I'm saying that right. Known as the Lord of Darkness, Iowa the Mungazoth is called upon in an issue of Creatures on the Loose from the 70s. This cosmic eldritch god-like entity could also be tied to the many-angled ones, who occasionally crop up in the Marvelverse. But we don't have enough information to really know whether or not for sure if Iowa the Mungazoth is a separate entity or simply one that we've maybe already met but is operating under a different name, under some kind of alias. He is one of the gods referred to in the comic by the High Priest of the Dragon King, known as Sa. Sa, in the story, aims to make 3 human sacrifices in order to give the energy to the Lords of Chaos that they need so that they may travel across the cosmos to Earth. Sounds like a bad idea. Sounds like you probably don't want the Lords of Chaos to come by, but you know, to each their own. I guess if you're the High Priest of the Dragon King, you do. That's what you want. I'm not here to judge. Number 7. God Quarry. In 2016's Thanos series, there's a place known as the God Quarry. It is a pit guarded by 3 eternal witches, known as the Coven. The pit is said to reward those who can overcome its challenges by granting them with great power. But first, you must face whatever it is that could potentially be holding you back. Once in the pit, you find yourself merged within it, becoming a part of it, and then you begin to see what it is that could most tempt you. For me, it would probably be a big pile of cookies. For many leaders who have come there seeking power, the temptation was too great and they could not escape. Instead, now a part of the pit, they remain trapped for eternity. But hey, with great risk comes great reward. And yeah, Thanos did have to go in that pit. And what happens? You're gonna have to read the series. I don't want to spoil it. Number 6. The Universal Church of Truth. Almost a misnomer, the Universal Church of Truth is not as innocent as it sounds. It is made up of believers from planets throughout the universe who worship the evil being known as Magus. The church invades planets, and if the planet's inhabitants refuse to accept and adopt their faith, they will burn it to the ground, killing anyone who refuses to join them. They're basically like a really insane cult that invades, converts, and conquers planets. So yeah, they sound better than they are.
Number 5, Dormammu. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, yeah, you get it. You saw the movie, you know what I'm doing. Doctor Strange's greatest nemesis is also one of the most powerful ancient evils in the Marvel Universe across the multiverse. Ruler of the Dark Dimension, Dormammu is an interdimensional entity capable of existing for eons, capable of all sorts of impressive magical feats like conjuration, being able to summon creatures under his dominion, even bending the law of physics to his will. Dormammu is already crazy strong, but it's only amplified more if he's in the Dark Dimension, his home turf. Now he doesn't just get a home field advantage by being there because the sun's not in his eyes. He's able to siphon energy directly from the Dark Dimension to fuel himself, as well as draining his followers for their energy. Dormammu is the perfect foil for a hero like Doctor Strange, an incredibly powerful, omnipotent being who can't be defeated outright with traditional brawls or fisticuffs, and needs to be outsmarted and outmaneuvered. Luckily, the Sorcerer Supreme usually has a handle on it. Usually.
Number 4, the Chaos King. The entity known as Amatsu Mikubashi, originally was portrayed as the Japanese god of evil, but in actuality, he was an offshoot of Oblivion, the cosmic entity embodying the void that existed before the universe began. Because of course he was. An incarnation of the primordial darkness and chaos that existed before the universe, the Chaos King exists as a dark counterpart to the cosmic being Eternity. That by itself makes Amatsu an incredibly powerful being on a cosmic level. In a mission to bring everything to chaos, he started waging war on all the gods of every pantheon in the universe, and he actually did defeat and take control of almost all of them. It took a combined effort of heroes plus Hercules, who was amped up to incredibly insane godlike levels, to take him down in the Chaos War storyline. Absolutely check it out if you haven't already, it's fantastic.
Number 3, Mephisto. If you're not a big comics fan, maybe you recognize the name Mephisto from countless Reddit threads and headlines saying he'd be appearing in the next episode of WandaVision somewhere. Remember how convinced we all were? Simpler days. So just who is Mephisto actually? Well, basically for all intents and purposes, he's the Marvel Comics version of Satan. Where things get incredibly confusing is that he's not actually Satan, because that's a separate character in the Marvel Universe, but he's his own evil, powerful entity, and boy is he that. Mephisto is a long-standing evil, responsible for a lot of some of the biggest suffering in the Marvel Universe. He captured Doctor Doom's mother's soul, he bonded Johnny Blaze to the Ghost Rider, and those are just some of his lesser feats. Mephisto is capable of full-scale reality alteration, like when he infamously changed the entire Marvel timeline to erase Peter and Mary Jane's marriage in exchange for healing Aunt May. Also, he could nip a timeline in the bud where he was defeated by Spider-Man's daughter. You gotta respect that level of pettiness. He hasn't shown up in the MCU yet, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's coming soon. Just give it some time. One more day, maybe.
And in at number 2 is Sidorak. Sidorak, also known as the Destroyer, Lord of Oblivion, and Master of the Raging Storm, is an immensely powerful extra-dimensional being hailing from the Crimson Cosmos. He was worshipped as a god and a demon by the primitive humans of Earth until he was banished back to the Crimson Cosmos. As the Destroyer, Sidorak's main goal is to just cause destruction and raise destructive power. To do this from the Crimson Cosmos, and also to win a wager with 8 other deities like himself, he created the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, which allows him to select a person to be his avatar, enhancing them to become the indestructible and immortal Juggernaut, like Kane Marco and the other avatars. Now, if you pay close attention to the magic wielders in the Marvel Universe, particularly Doctor Strange, you will hear them invoking Sidorak's name to cast some of their strongest spells. For example, the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. He doesn't really show up a lot in the pages of Marvel Comics, but when he does, it's always as this super imposing, terrible force.
And finally, coming in at the number 1 spot, well, it only made sense to have this below everyone else, the one below all. Yeah. Kinda hard to top that. The one below all is the dark side of the one above all, the highest form of creation in the Marvel multiverse. If the one above all is the embodiment of all the compassion and love that exists out there, well then the one below is the opposite of that and the beautiful embodiment of all the hatred and rage that's inside us all. It's a bit of an eldritch creature, existing in the lowest points of reality, you know, below all, quite literally, it's in the name. It's responsible for all the gamma radiation in the world, as this is how it manifests itself throughout the multiverse. All of Hulk's rage and anger stems from drops of hatred of the one below all, just a tiny fraction of what it could be capable of. The one below all has existed before the multiverse, the universe itself even, and is thought to ultimately be the harbinger of all evil that's ever manifested in the Marvel Universe. Considering how much darkness, how much hate, how much evil exists out there, that's gotta count for something. Mephisto was unable to thwart the one below all, saying it was more powerful than he was. Bruce Banner theorized that no, God of the Symbiotes was just another avatar of the one below all, meaning when it comes to ultimate evil, it's kinda hard to top something below it all.
And for this list, starting off at number 10 is Magneto. Starting off this list with the absolute GOAT. Magneto has been around for a long time, and a majority of that time, he was a villain, or at best, an anti-hero. As the number 1 rival of Professor Charles Xavier, Magneto's view of the world is pretty interesting given that he was the child of a Jewish family during World War II, and yet, after years of persecution for being a mutant, he believed his race to be superior to regular humans nonetheless, and that humans should be subservient or destroyed. Under this mentality, he led the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants as well as other groups against the X-Men and the Earth's heroes. Now everybody knows that Magneto is not someone you mess with. He has enough power and enough experience to stomp almost anyone. For example, while he has become more of just a hero nowadays, there's a point where he gets his heart ripped out by a villain called Uranos. But he keeps himself alive by using his powers to keep his blood flowing. He's just that insanely powerful. But being born around World War II and the rival to Charles Xavier, he's been up there in the age department since he was introduced, but always manages to decimate his enemies. Number 9, Cassandra Nova. Sticking with X-related heroes, we have the evil twin, or counterpart, or anti-self to Charles Xavier. Cassandra Nova isn't really a mutant, but she isn't really a person either. She's actually what is known as a mummadry, the spirit that is equal to the opposite of a person. Wrap your head around that one. This is about to get wild, so buckle up. Because of the genetic mutant potential of Charles Xavier, his mummadry was able to create a physical form for itself when Sharon Xavier was pregnant with Charles, making Cassandra basically Xavier's twin. Now Charles, even as a baby, sensed Cassandra as an evil presence, and he used his psychic abilities to try and take her out in the womb. Cassandra survived though, and so she spent decades as this terrifying mass of cells in a sewer, building herself a new body and planning her revenge on her brother. Cassandra has all the same telepathic powers as Charles himself, plus some telekinetic abilities as well. But being a mummadry, she has the terrifying ability to manipulate DNA, breaking it down, copying it, and being able to construct physical bodies. She can even phase through solid objects, regenerate insanely fast, and enhance and evolve other mutant abilities. Number 8, Granny Goodness. Stepping away from Marvel for a moment, Granny Goodness is probably the complete opposite of anything we would describe as goodness. She was originally one of the lowlies, which is basically the peasant class on DC Universe's Apocalypse. From a younger age, she was taken by Darkseid and raised and trained to become head of the Shock Troops and the Female Furies. She has the responsibility to bring young warriors from other worlds to fight each other to earn the right to be trained by her. But Granny Goodness also has multiple orphanages where she both trains and disciplines younger individuals looking for potential warriors for Darkseid. Now, being a resident of Apocalypse, Granny here does have quite a bit of power. She has superhuman strength, speed, durability, and senses, as well as invulnerability and an advanced immune system and immortality. But being immortal doesn't necessarily save you from looking old as hell, which is why we get Granny Goodness. Number 7, Horticulture. You know, sometimes a group of villains comes along that just kind of makes me smile. And Horticulture, who first appeared in X-Men Volume 5, Number 3 in December 2019, are one such group. Horticulture is described on their wiki as a group of agrochemists, biotechnologists, and eugenic engineers who specialize in the genetic manipulation and propagation of all things botanical. So, to me and my tiny brain, I take that information and translate it to, it's a bunch of old plant scientist ladies. Because that's what they are. It's a bunch of older ladies who are seeking to radically depopulate humans from the Earth in order to bring the Earth and nature to a state of balance. With the climate the way it is right now, it's actually kind of an understandable cause, even if it's utterly insane. Using their know-how, they made biological modifications to themselves, like resistance to telepathy and extended lifespans, but they also developed technology to manipulate their environment, inhibit mutant powers, and generate illusions on men. But they also have experience as computer programmers, being able to access the Krakoan gateways and trade information with the villainous anti-mutant group known as Orcus. Number 6, Old Loki from the MCU. Alright, I'm going to step away from the pages of comic books altogether here. During the MCU's Loki show, Loki gets sent to the Void, where the whole place is basically filled with other alternate versions of himself. But he specifically became part of a group of 4 other Lokis: Boastful Loki, Alligator Loki, Kid Loki, and the topic for today, Classic Loki. Classic Loki had a similar story to regular Loki from the Sacred Timeline, but when confronted by Thanos in Avengers Infinity War, this Loki decided to use duplication magic to survive the whole thing. He then spent a hell of a long time on a remote planet, ashamed of the nefarious things he had done over time. When he finally tried to return to see his brother, Thor, who he missed, he was an older man, and them meeting caused a divergent timeline, getting himself pruned and sent to the Void. He he has probably one of the best moments in the show. When Sylvie, Loki, and Mobius try to escape from the void, and the reality-consuming Alioth tries to stop them, classic Loki uses his magic to create a true-to-life, massive illusion of Asgard itself, all while this weird version of Ride of the Valkyries was playing in the background, distracting Alioth and giving me just straight up goosebumps. Like, I am actually getting them right now just thinking about it. Like, it was such a cool moment. Satisfying. Number 5, Uranos. Okay, technically this guy actually appeared in What If number 24 in September of 1980, but he didn't really do much and was never really mentioned until very recently. Uranos the Undying is an Eternal and one of the deadliest beings in the Marvel Universe. Uranos, like every Eternal, was created by the Celestials 1 million years ago, but he believed the Eternals best fulfilled their purpose if they exterminated both the deviants and humans, all life outside the universe, and imprisoned the Celestials. Luckily, his brothers Kronos and Oceanus disagreed, plunging the Eternals into a civil war. Ultimately, Uranos lost that war and was captured by his brothers and became the first Eternal to be imprisoned within the Exclusion, where he stayed for over 500,000 years because of the failsafe he imposed upon the Machine. That failsafe being that if he dies, his greatest celestial designed weapons will be unleashed on the world. Recently, mutants have been revealed to be related to deviants, making the X-Men enemies to the Eternals, and the Eternal Druid called on Uranus for help in Axe Judgment Day number 1. And he definitely did help. As in a matter of 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion, along with a bunch of other powerful Omega level mutants. Number 4, Yuga Khan. Yuga Khan is the first ever tyrannical ruler of the planet of Apocalypse, and the father of both Drax, who would become the Infinity Man, and Uxas, who would become Darkseid. Given his nature as essentially a god and one that fathered the current gods, Yuga Khan is certainly ancient, being essentially immortal. As an example, before the fourth world is even fully formed, Yuga Khan alongside his wife, Hegra, and their sons ruled Apocalypse, creating one of the most feared empires in the entire universe. But being such an astronomically powerful being, it wasn't enough for him. Yuga Khan was obsessed with becoming the most powerful being in the universe and wanted to be able to essentially control it all. But he was also obsessed with finding out the reason for why it all exists. So he's a conqueror, sure, but he's also a philosopher, which is nice. This obsession is what brought him to the Source Wall, getting trapped in it while trying to unravel the mysteries of the Source. All the inhabitants of New Genesis are way stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, being almost all on a level akin to Superman, while also being immortal. But Yuga Khan, he is the most powerful of them all. So much so that after an absolutely colossal effort, Yuga Khan was even able to break free of the Source Wall. That act released energies that could be felt throughout the galaxy and caused the universe itself to shake. I don't even know how that works. He then replenished his power by absorbing the entire life force of the planet Velos and all its inhabitants, and then did the same thing for millions of other worlds while on his way to Apocalypse. His return to Apocalypse made everyone tremble, including its current ruler, his son Darkseid, who he imprisoned in the core of the planet. Most recently though, Yuga Khan was one of the beings empowering Shazam during Darkseid War. Number 3, Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath was a sorcerer who lived in Earth's Hyborian era, aka the time of Conan the Barbarian. So yes, he is incredibly ancient. He actually isn't the original Kulan Gath though. Well, he is, and he isn't. You see, Kulan Gath had a slave who poisoned him and assumed his identity. When this Kulan Gath sought out the training of the then Sorcerer Supreme, Mekri Ra, he was refused. He responded by taking the life of and consuming the Sorcerer Supreme, gaining his power. As an enemy of Conan the Barbarian, Kulan was eventually beheaded by the Barbarian, but not before he had become immortal by putting his essence into a magical amulet. So yes, he pulled a Voldemort and made a Horcrux. After the amulet had made its way to Manhattan in the modern era, it ended up in the hands of a mugger, who donned the amulet, allowing Kulan Gath to possess and transform the body of the mugger. Then, he transformed Manhattan into a replica of the time he came from, manipulated the minds of everyone there, and took control of the minds of the Avengers, X-Men, New Mutants, and Morlocks to hunt down Spider-Man. It took the combined powers of Doctor Strange and the mutant magic to change time so that the mugger was killed by Nimrod instead and never possessed by Gath. You know you're a problem when people just go back in time to make sure that you never get back. Number 2, the Great Darkness. So great. You can't get much more ancient than existing before creation. The Great Darkness was the literal darkness and nothingness that existed before the Presence ever came to be. When the Presence, aka God, said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness is the one who went into hiding. At some point, a clan known as the Brujeria, which is, I think I said that right, attempted a ritual to reawaken the Great Darkness in order to destroy God and reshape the universe. Instead of being completely evil though, it was more like an animal who was confused and didn't understand its power or what its purpose even was. The Great Darkness, also sometimes referred to as the Great Evil Beast, went on a warpath, easily defeating many heroes and waging a solo assault on heaven itself, decimating everything in its way to demand answers from the Presence. It even caused the 3 main figures of hell to form a union with each other just in case it decided to attack them, which it didn't. When the Great Darkness reached heaven though, it met Swamp Thing, of all people, who taught it the concept of good and evil, explaining that one couldn't survive without the other. The darkness then reached up and God reached back and they became one and the same as yin and yang, or as a balance, that kind of thing. Recently though, the Great Darkness played a large role in the Dark Crisis event. It's basically the overarching villain of the entire DC multiverse, but also it's kind of just a force of nature. Sort of. Number 1, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose the bigger, more dangerous, and surprisingly not well-known Pappy of Galactus? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, also known as the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Thimble Winter, was the one who brought the end to the 6th iteration of the cosmos, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, the one who becomes Galactus, alive. The Black Winter essentially made Galen his herald, so when the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor who possessed the Thor Force into his Herald of Thunder, granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's nuts! That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. But luckily, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe. He's just here for his herald, Galactus. But still, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter completely, and it's incredibly awesome.
Number 10, Chameleon. Chameleon made his first appearance in the very first issue of The Amazing Spider-Man. Although there are a lot of other famous supervillains that people think of when it comes to Peter Parker's gallery of famous and capable rogues, Chameleon was the first that Spider-Man would come up against. In this very first issue, Spider-Man attempted to join the Fantastic Four, who basically fight him due to the fact that they think he's some kind of villain for breaking into the Baxter Building. Of course, Spider-Man was only attempting to do so to impress them so they would invite him to join their team. When they refused to accept him into the team, Spider-Man set on his own to fight crime, and Chameleon disguised himself as Spider-Man to protect his own identity while committing crimes himself, ruining Spidey's reputation and ensuing Peter to go up against Chameleon to put a stop to him. Number 9, Dr. Von Doom and his Doombots. Sounds like a cool band. Dr. Von Doom and his Doombots. We were first introduced to Dr. Doom as a supervillain in issue 5 of the first volume of the Fantastic Four. In his introductory issue, the famous and brilliant villain used his brains and gadgets to capture the Fantastic Four. He wanted them to help him capture Blackbeard's treasure by using a time travel machine that he had constructed to send them into the past. In the end, they tricked him with a chest full of chains, and the thing smashed Dr. Doom to bits, only to find out that the Doom that they were dealing with was actually a robotic copy. The actual Doom also ended up getting defeated as well, and the Fantastic Four got away. But this certainly wouldn't be the last that they would see of Doom, who would become their most iconic foe. Number 8, Miracle Man. What's up with all these original Fantastic Four rogues who kidnapped Invisible Woman, by the way, or Invisible Girl as she was known then? Apparently kidnapping Sue was a classic villain move back in the day. Miracle Man was originally a stage magician who claimed that he was even more powerful than the Fantastic Four, who just so happened to be in his audience when he was performing. After that he proved this in his stage show, he decided that he should probably become a criminal. He was so talented and smart and obviously, I guess, selfish and villainous somewhat, if he decided to go that route as opposed to the heroic one, that he made the Fantastic Four think that a promotional statue for a film called The Monster of Mars had come to life. While the Fantastic Four were distracted dealing with that whole scenario, he pulled off a series of robberies. But don't worry, he was defeated. After, of course, he kidnapped the Invisible Girl. Like I said, That's a thing that people like to do back in the day. Number 7. Skrulls. That's right, Skrulls are some of the oldest villains around. Did you know that? I know, it's pretty surprising. Although they aren't exactly considered clean-cut villains anymore. They have even teamed up with Earth's mightiest heroes, the Avengers, before to help save the universe. Originally, however, the Skrulls appeared in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue 2, and were hell-bent on invading Earth. This was right after the FF team had been introduced, which was basically all that issue 1 was about, an origin story. The Skrulls knew that the FF were the main protectors of Earth, despite the fact that they'd sort of just started their superhero career, which is kind of weird. Anyways, they decided to impersonate the FF, commit a bunch of villainous deeds while impersonating them in order to frame them and have Earth's military capture and kill the Fantastic Four team, so that the Skrulls might then invade Earth with no one powerful enough to put a stop to them. Of course, this plan was foiled when the FF trapped the imposters, unmasked them as Skrulls, and ended up posing as those Skrulls to tell the Skrull leader that Earth's defenses were too powerful for the invasion to succeed, thus scaring them off. Basically, they defeated an entire Skrull invasion in that comic, so that's pretty impressive. The Skrulls that originally posed as the Fantastic Four members were forced to stay behind after the invasion left, because obviously the Fantastic Four was not going to let them go back up onto that ship. So they then decided to take the form of cows and continue to live on Earth in apparent peace. Peaceful cows. Apparently they'd rather be anything but Skrulls, so they said in the comic, which I thought, oh, that's kind of like rude. I'm sure there are Skrulls that really like being Skrulls. Ugh. Number 6. Dr. Sivana. If you've seen the film Shazam, you likely are familiar with Dr. Sivana, or if you're aware of the Captain Marvel / Shazam comics. He was one of the first villains that Shazam actually came up against and made his comic book debut in Whiz Comics issue number 2. His first master plot of villainy? To ransom radio waves. The 1940s, what a time. He asked for $50 million and, if he wasn't paid, threatened to create radio silence everywhere. Because this was the 40s, of course, that was a really big deal. Although right now we'd probably be like, who listens to the radio? But also $50 million is an insane amount of money to ask for. I feel like if Dr. Sivana hadn't been so greedy, it might have worked out better for him. Because $50 million in the 1940s? Jeez! In the end, Billy Batson and his Captain Marvel form defeated Sivana by smashing his radio silencer tech, which was like this huge machine by the way, to smithereens. But as promised, the Doctor would return to battle Captain Marvel, or as he's known now, Shazam, again, becoming one of his mainstay villains. Number 5. Morlun and the Inheritors. Morlun and the Inheritors sounds like the name of a band. A band of vampires? Not a thing. A coven of vampires, really, I guess I should say. And no, I don't believe they play musical instruments and or perform in any kind of musical acts, sadly. Morlun and the Inheritors are a threat that we meet as we go into the Spider-Verse. They were the main antagonists of the Spider-Verse event in the comics, which promised to feature all the alternate Spider-Men, women, and folks that had ever featured. And they were also the main antagonists of the follow-up event, Spider-Geddon. The Inheritors are basically energy vampires that feed specifically on what is known as totemic life energy. What is that? What is a totem? It is usually a superpowered or somewhat unique individual who represents some kind of powerful animal instinct or arachnid avatar, like spiders! Morlun specifically is well known for being a main villain of Spider-Man's, and while he's not as prominently featured as, some of other Spidey's villains, he is still particularly powerful. We don't really know, I don't think, how old the Inheritors or Morlun are, at least not in their first life, but we do know they're pretty old, having participated in fights in the multiverse seemingly a long time ago. Also, they'd like to dress up super Victorian, so they gotta at least be from that era or beyond, although they're not necessarily Earth-based villains, they're multiversal villains. Number 4. Sin. Sin might be one that people are a little bit more familiar with in another form, but also there might be a lot of you out there who aren't, as this villain hails from the Spawn comics. If you are up to date with your Spawn reading, then you know who I'm talking about here, but for those of you who aren't up to date, or who maybe have never read Spawn, this villain was actually formerly known as a longtime ally of Al Simmons' Spawn, his mentor in a way, Cogliostro. While initially just seeming like a well-meaning fellow Hellspawn, seeking to teach Al the ropes and also help to guide him away from being fully used as a pawn of hell, Cogliostro is actually later revealed to be more ancient than we might have otherwise thought, in fact also being known by another name even before he was known as Cog. Cain. Yeah, the Cain, the man from biblical myth who killed his brother and was condemned for it, Cain of Cain and Abel. After revealing that he was really only helping Spawn to serve his own interests and becoming a villain, Cog was redeemed once more for a short little while before becoming a villain again, who has the ability to drain the power of other hellspawns, being known now as Sin. Sin with two N's. Number 3, Ramatut. While we all know Kang the Conqueror now, thanks to him being featured in the MCU in Quantumania, and the hype for his inclusion in that film being very, very real, I would say at this point, not everyone is as familiar with the other versions of Nathaniel Richards from Earth 6311. Despite the fact that this is a villain from the future, Kang actually has existed across time in many different forms, adopting the form even of an ancient pharaoh. This was back when Kang was a ruler in ancient Egypt, before he was really even Kang. Nathaniel Richards became obsessed with the reality of Earth 616 and would eventually construct a time machine shaped like a sphinx and use it to travel back in time to around 2960 BC. Having brought with him a robotic army and advanced futuristic weapons, it wasn't long before Nathaniel was the ruler of Egypt, taking the name of Ramatut. This version of Nathaniel also became focused and obsessed on the creation of En-Saba-Nur, who, as Ramatut knew, was destined to become the world's first mutant. Number 2, Perpetua. Perpetua is one of those characters who is super powerful and who tons of people should know about, really, just for that reason alone, I would say. But no. Instead, most folks know more about the Anti-Monitor, Perpetua's son, than they do about her. Granted, this could be because she's simply a newer character, and in that case, I mean, fair enough. She's a newer character, but she's also really old because she's kind of like a retcon character. Perpetua is known for being the first one to create the multiverse, or at least, you know, one of the first people, depending on how you like to reconcile DC lore, because I feel like Perpetua isn't the first one that we've said that about. While Anti-Monitor is the character most well known for causing the Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's later revealed that Perpetua was the one truly pulling his strings and therefore responsible for this crisis. In fact, Perpetua feeds off Crisis energy and is said to have been responsible for all crises we've seen. At least all crises we've seen before Dark Crisis, likely, since I think she was dead when that one actually took place, so, or at least defeated. Is she still alive? I don't think so. Number 1, Rotath of Lemuria. Heading back to the Hyborian Age once again on one of our ancient lists, which by the way, if you want to visit the Hyborian Age again and again, you should check out part 1 and part 2 of our ancient superheroes list. We got you. Rotath of Lemuria is a common example of how magic was presented often in stories from the Hyborian Age, especially in regards to Conan's story there. Rotath made his first appearance in issue number 37 of Conan the Barbarian from the 70s, when everyone was into the sword and sorcery genre. In this same issue, Rotath was killed by Kull after he was hired by the king of Lemuria, who was frightened of Rotath's power. As he died though, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull, casting a spell so that he might return. And so he did, this time in a golden body, but still he ended up being defeated, this time not by Kull directly, but instead of course after fighting Conan and Juma, and also being defeated by a giant slug, which that part is a little random, but hey, I'll take it.
Number 10, Mistress Death. To call this character evil is a bit of a miscommunication. She is just a law of the universe, a force of nature, a cosmic being carrying out her duty. But to many people, she is an evil entity because, I mean, losing a loved one is one of the most emotionally painful things we can go through. No matter if you see her as evil or just doing her job, she has been around since the creation of the universe, so there is no doubt that she is ancient. So I'm keeping her here at the top of the list because she isn't entirely evil and has comforted and even saved a few people on a few occasions, but still brings the end of the line. She keeps balance in the universe, taking away life while other cosmic entities give it. Also, she's a big part of the reason Thanos has done all the horrible things he's done in Marvel Comics, so there's that as well to make her seem a bit more evil.
Coming up on the 9th spot is No. That's with a K. And this fella is bad news. He's an Eldritch entity, the god of darkness, ruler of the void, and oh yeah, homeboy created the symbiotes. Any evil that's come from the many symbiotes can all be traced back to No, who rules over the hive mind. When you stop and consider just how much suffering the symbiotes have been responsible for, how much damage and destruction, and all of that can be pointed back to Null, you gotta figure that is a pretty powerful ancient evil. Decked out with some sweet symbiote armor and an impressive sword, Null has his sights set on galactic conquest with his symbiote army. And honestly, he was making a pretty good play for the throne were he not stopped by Eddie Brock in a truly staggering duel of cosmic proportions. Sure, yeah, you might have birthed the symbiote race, but it's hard for anyone to top the guy who made symbiotes cool in the first place. You can't beat Venom. I mean, he's got his own theme song by Eminem. How many of us can say the same?
Number 8, Selene. While a lot of beings on this list are cosmic and godlike in their nature, Selene is a mutant external and a magician born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Yikes. Essentially, she is a vampire, just without any of the blood draining stuff. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. But that's not her only powers. As an external, she also possesses immortality, allowing her to even resurrect herself. Since she has been around for so long, she is quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She has demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and the knack for being just pretty sinister.
Number 7, Shumagorath. Now maybe you remember Shumagorath from a star-studded appearance in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Except psych! Due to a licensing issue, that was actually Gargantos. But it was supposed to be Shumagorath, so you were right to think that. Marvel's resident Lovecraftian god, who's lived for millions of years beyond the stars. Even older than the Marvel Universe itself. Quite literally, if you want to get a bit metatextual with it, since Shumagorath began life as a villain for the Conan mythos, tying itself into the greater Cthulhu mythos with H.P. Lovecraft, who was a pretty good friend of Robert E. Howard back in the day. It's a pretty interesting backstory and makes sense since Shumagorath is an all-powerful multi-dimensional entity. It only makes sense that it exists across the multiverse in ours as well. Shumagorath is about as powerful as a Lovecraftian god can get, boasting all the usual feats: incredible strength, difficult to put down, all kinds of psychokinetic abilities that leads him into all sorts of clashes with everybody's favorite sorcerer, Doctor Strange.
Number 6, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose a bigger version of him? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Fimbulwinter, for the Norse mythology people out there, was the one who brought the end of the 6th iteration of the universe, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, and that's the guy who becomes Galactus. When the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor, who possesses the Thor Force, into his Herald of Thunder, and it's awesome. Granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. Luckily though, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe, he is just here for his herald, Galactus. Luckily, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter. It's all just super awesome. Definitely check it out.
At number 5, we have Necron. You ever hear of the philosophical darkness that preceded the light? Well, his name is Necron, and he's the leader of the Black Lantern Corps and the Lord of the Unliving. And that wasn't even a monetization-friendly self-censor either. That's the actual title of the land that he rules over, where the souls of the unalive await passage to their final residence, like a sort of purgatory. And it's from these unliving souls that Necron draws his power. He first became a threat to Earth after becoming aware of our reality's existence when an interdimensional rift is accidentally opened between the two dimensions after a paradox occurs in which an immortal being was banished to the realm of the unalived YouTube. Anyhow, desiring the world that he was now able to see but being too large to pass through the rift, Necron imbues that aforementioned immortal with enormous power and sends him to go terminate the Guardians of the Universe in an attempt to increase the size of the rift. And that immortal, whose name I don't want to give away because he may or may not be the top spot on this list, does his part and sends several Guardians and Green Lanterns to go see Necron, if you catch my drift. That is until Hal Jordan managed to enter Necron's realm, inciting the spirits of the recently defeated Lanterns to rebel against Necron, distracting him long enough for the Lanterns on the other side to seal up the rift, albeit with Hal trapped inside. Poor guy. At number 4, we have Shumagorath. Now you may recognize him as the dimension-hopping Gargantos from Multiverse of Madness, but make no mistake, that That one-eyed monster in the movie is modeled after Shuma-Gorath. They just couldn't use the name in the film because of legal reasons. Because everyone knows how much lawyers love to ruin everything we love for the money. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to call this fictional one-eyed tentacle monster a particular name? To the courts! Jokes aside, Shuma owes his apparent ancientness to the fact that he belongs to a group of cosmic nightmares called the Old Ones, so he's not exactly trying to hide it. After conquering and ruling over hundreds of dimensions, Shuma-Gorath and his gang of geriatrics came to the Marvel continuity realm on numerous occasions, the first of which being well over 1,000,000 years ago. Though on each visit he goes on conquering Earth, tyrannizing the people, and commanding human sacrifices and tribal wars. That is until he's inevitably banished by sorcerers or gods, at least temporarily. Shuma's never discouraged, however, because when you've lived through countless eternities, what's a few 100,000 years? At number 3 we have Ra's al Ghul, whose name by the way literally translates from Arabic as head of the demon. Just badass. The first mention of Ra's al Ghul in recorded history comes from the Crusades back in 1285. And if that's not ancient enough for you, too bad, deal with it, man. Even way back then, Ra's was so feared that the people of his time gave his name the Voldemort treatment, never so much as uttering his name, as he was rumored to be a creature unbound by even death itself, with the power to crush entire civilizations in the palm of his hand. Unbeknownst to the populace at the time, he owed much of his claim to fame to the League of Assassins, which he founded, who were so good at doing their job unnoticed that all of their nefarious accomplishments were accredited singularity to the Ghoul, or at least that's how it was in the beginning. Ra and his gang have been able to survive all these centuries thanks to bathing regularly in supernatural Lazarus pits, which grants Ghoul immorality, heals his injuries, even flushes out your pores. At number 2 we have Nathaniel Richards, otherwise known as Kang the Conqueror. You heard me right, ladies and gents. He who remains at the end of time is simultaneously one of the most ancient beings in the Marvel universe. How can that be, you ask? 2 words, my friend: time travel, or dimension hopping, depending on how you want to look at it. And for as simple as those 2 words are, they make for one of the most convoluted characters in comic book history, as there are innumerable iterations of the character spanning across countless eons. Like, for example, there are versions of Nathaniel who become Rama-Tut before becoming Kang, others who after becoming Kang become Rama-Tut again, only to then become either Immortus or Scarlet Centurion, and or back to Kang. Some flip back and forth between Rama-Tut and Kang before becoming Mr. Griffin, while other Kangs don't become Kang at all, but instead become Iron Lad, and then from Iron Lad you get Kid Immortus, and then back to Kang. Yeah, it's messy. But the point here is that even though Nathaniel Richards was born in the furthest future, making him one of the youngest beings in the Marvel Universe, he is simultaneously one of the most ancient villains, as thanks to his time machine, he was able to instate himself as the pharaoh in ancient Egypt. At number 1 we have Krona. So if I'm gonna go and bend the rules on what qualifies as an ancient villain with Kang, there's no way I'm gonna leave out the guy whose time traveling shenanigans caused the very birth of evil itself. No kidding, guys, time travel ain't a joke. Born amongst the race of beings responsible for the creation of the Lantern Rings, that being the Malthusians, Krona was a scientist who allowed his thirst for knowledge to corrupt his morality, creating experiments to the detriment of the entire cosmos. His forbidden experiments culminated in the time machine that would allow himself to witness the beginning of time itself, where, or should I say when, he was able to catch a glimpse of the hand of creation depositing the speck that would become the universe. But at that instant, his time machine exploded, fracturing the universe into infinite shatters that would become the multiverse, and simultaneously unleashing the primordial evil. This was the final straw that enabled the Malthusians to take action against Krona, converting him into a state of pure energy which was sent to circle the universe for all of eternity. But eventually it ended up in the dimension of the unalive, and thus introducing Necron to our reality. Gee, thanks! What a helpful chap. I mean, who wouldn't want not 1, but 2 primordial evils adding more chaos and destruction to our already hectic lives? I mean, it's not like we were lacking in the villain department after your first screw up. Some people just never learn.
Coming in at number 10 is Selene. Selene is a mutant, and what is known as an external. Externals are essentially a group of immortals that include characters like Apocalypse and Gideon, who can resurrect themselves and all share a psychic link, which is the main thing that separates them from other immortals. Selene is also a magician and was born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Essentially, she's like an energy vampire. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. Since she has been around for so long, she's quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell lot with that power. She's demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and a knack for being pretty sinister, but not really being too well known to casual fans. Number 9. Barbados. Barbados is one of the big bads from the death metal event, but because we had the Batman Who Laughs, I think Barbados kind of fell by the wayside for a few people, and I'll admit, I was one of them. But Barbados is nothing to scoff at. In the earliest days of existence, 2 siblings came into reality, tasked with monitoring creation. Along with them came a third being known as the Forger, who was set to watch over creations that would exist in the future. The Forger made its home in the Forge of Worlds inside what would later be named the Dark Multiverse. The Forger created universes based on the hopes and fears of every living thing. And while the stable universes became part of the multiverse, the Forger would dispatch its dragon to destroy the unstable worlds so their energy could be returned to the Forge and recycled. That dragon is Barbados. Barbados had a lust for destruction, which eventually led him to take out the Forger and corrupt the World Forge. The unstable worlds persisted beyond their time and became part of the dark multiverse field with horrifying realities. He then changed his goals, setting his warpath onto the regular multiverse. Now fast forward multiple centuries, and Barbados' followers started to secretly prepare Batman to become the doorway for Barbados to enter the Prime Earth from the dark multiverse, causing a big old mess in the DC multiverse. Number 8. Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, while on the cusp of the afterlife and in incredible pain due to his hunger, this mutant's powers finally activated. He gained superhuman strength and durability alongside an extremely bestial form similar to a minotaur, but almost as if made of stone, like a minotaur statue, but cooler. While he is incredibly strong and durable, his even more powerful mutant ability is called Empathic War Infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he went boom. Decimus became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. And in at number 7 is Conquest. Vulturemites, who are featured in Image Comics' Invincible series, are incredibly hardy folk. They have levels of strength and durability akin to Superman without having to be solar charged and without being allergic to big green rocks. They also grow stronger and stronger with both age and experience. One of their oldest, most honored warriors is a Vulturemite by the name of Conquest. Vulturemites live for a very long time. Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, is a fully adult Vulturemite, and he has lived for thousands and thousands of years, and he has only a small show of white hair to show for it. Of all the Vulturemites seen in the comics, a rare few have fully white hair. Conquest not only has that, but he has lost a lot of his hair, is super wrinkly, and he's also battle scarred and missing an arm. Back in the day, the Vulturemites were exposed to a virus that nearly wiped them out, called the Scourge virus. Conquest was one of the few that survived, but he was left weakened after it left his system, which happened to coincide with his arrival on a planet filled with Ragnar, which are the only species in the universe that can actually kill Vulturemites. So that's where the missing arm and scarring comes from. Conquest is one of the strongest Vulturemites around, and even when his face is turned into tomato soup by Invincible, he still regenerates and comes back for round 2. Number 6. Malbolgia. And we are sticking with Image Comics for this point, but moving away from Invincible, we are going to talk about Spawn. Now, yes, I am a little lacking in the knowledge department when it comes to Spawn comics, but I do know that the whole reason Al Simmons became a Hellspawn in the first place is because of this guy, the ruler of the 8th sphere of Hell, Malbolgia. Over 70,000 years ago, this being was created by a past ruler of Hell out of necroplasm rivers, but he was so powerful that he betrayed, overpowered, and took the life of his creator. In order to wage war on heaven and destroy God, he created an army of Hellspawn, but he needed a general, which he couldn't find until he found Al Simmons. He made a deal with a man named Jason Wynn to take Al's life, which is when Malbolgia made a deal for Al to become his general in exchange for being able to see his wife. But in the end, it didn't really work out too well for this ruler of Hell, did it? Nope. Number 5. Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul was born around 700 years ago, and thanks to the Lazarus pits, he has been able to keep his body in working order. But he discovered the pits when he was an older gentleman and keeps the look of someone with a significant amount of years to him. After he came in contact with the pits, he eventually became a master martial artist and a master fencer, gaining a massive amount of wealth, and he started creating organizations to rid the world of crime, with his first being called the Demon, which the later League of Assassins is a branch of. Rage's purpose within the League of Assassins is to eliminate all evil in the world by destroying all of humanity and just starting all over. Obviously, that mentality means he routinely has run-ins with the superhero community, especially Batman, who he helped train. Rage has had many plans over the years that tried to destroy the world, and he has also beaten the entire JLA when he discovered Batman's notes. Now, with his years of experience and his vast amount of accumulated resources, this older fellow is a massive threat to both the heroes and the world. Number 4. The Joker. During the absolutely fantastic 3 Jokers storyline, we learn there have actually been 3 Jokers plaguing Gotham over the years, and among the 3 of them is the Golden Age Joker, and he is clearly much older than the other 2. Now, to be completely transparent here, whether this story is canon or not is an area of debate, so it's up to you if this one counts, but the Golden Age Joker, known as the Criminal, is the only one of the 3 Jokers to be a predominantly serious crime lord, and he even says that laughing and smiling is physically painful for him. Another thing that makes this entry a little arguable is that of these 3 Jokers, we don't know which one, if any of them, is the Joker. Even if only one remains in the end, the best part of this story is the uncertainty about which one is the one who started it all. Now, seeing as the Criminal is the oldest, classic version, he seems to be the one who started it all, creating more Jokers to mess with Batman. But the other 2 Jokers have been featured in incredibly important Batman stories as well. The comic really explores all of it, and if you haven't yet, make sure you check out Batman 3 Jokers as soon as possible. Number 3. Maestro. The Incredible Hulk has certainly been through the ringer in his decorated career, but few versions of the character are the living embodiment of that fact, like the Maestro. An alternate version of Bruce Banner from an apocalyptic future, this version of the character is far more intense and complex, but also much older. The best way to explain Maestro is to say that he is basically a smarter, older, villainous version of Dr. Bruce Banner, with all the powers and abilities of the original, but with a touch of nuclear radiation. He has much more of a cosmic and spiritual side to him than the normal Hulk does, but he is also twice as strong as Hulk is, and he retains all the intelligence of Bruce Banner, but with years and years more experience. Despite all that extra strength, brain power, and experience, he still gets outmaneuvered by the Hulk, who sends Maestro back in time to the site of the gamma bomb that created them. But even then, the Maestro's spirit remains on the bones left behind after the explosion went off and he came back to life. Number 2. Agatha Harkness. Like a few of these villains, when we first met Agatha Harkness in Fantastic Four number 94 from October of 1969, she was already elderly. She started out as the nanny for the newly born Franklin Richards, and using her magical powers, she even saved the Fantastic Four from the Frightful Four and a handful of other villains, and also helped Franklin when his powers first started to emerge. But she went on to have an interesting relationship with the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff, but also her mother, Natalia Maximoff. That's because this sweet nanny Agatha is actually an incredibly ancient sorcerer who was around to remember the sinking of Atlantis nearly 18,000 years ago. And she was probably the most powerful of the original witches during the Salem witch trials, an event that she actually supported as she thought it would cull the weak magic users who held them back. Agatha, like a lot of older villains, is pretty damn complex. She has helped out heroes on multiple occasions, but she's also done some pretty sinister stuff. But there's no doubt that she is much stronger than both heroes and villains first assume. Number 1. Baron von Strucker. Baron Wolfgang von Strucker was born in the 19th century, so he ain't a young fella by any means. He fought with the Axis powers during World War II alongside and under the Red Skull. He was a top villain at the time, not just for Captain America, but more prominently as an adversary for Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos. And that carried through after the war ended, as Strucker was instrumental in the rise of Hydra and then became the Supreme Hydra. He was even responsible for the corruption of S.H.I.E.L.D. using Hydra to completely take over large parts of S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. When Captain America returned, and then the Red Skull did as well, Strucker began to lose his leadership role within Hydra, and so he faked his own passing, choosing to instead manipulate events from the shadows. Eventually though, Strucker got the Death Spore virus, which is why he is on this list. He's old, and many people don't know he has this particular enhancement. While he is an excellent strategist, a highly intelligent, exceptional hand-to-hand combatant, swordsman and marksman who uses Hydra tech to live longer and be in top physical condition, the Death Spore virus bonded Strucker's DNA with the Death Spore itself, enabling him to be revived after passing away. He hasn't aged since getting the virus, he heals at an incredible rate, is invulnerable to minor injuries, resistant to toxins and disease, and he can even release the Death Spore virus from his body at will, taking his victims' lives nearly instantly if he chooses to.
Number 10, Vandal Savage. Vandal Savage is definitely one of the most ancient villains out there. It's actually kinda like his whole thing. Savage originally existed all the way back in the prehistoric ages, having initially been a caveman. He got his powers from a radioactive meteorite which granted him immortality and enhanced intelligence. Even way back then, he was fighting heroes like Batman, if you can believe it. This was after Batman was sent on some time adventures after facing off against Darkseid. While he was suspected as being dead, in reality Darkseid's Omega Sanction had simply banished Batman to wander through time, which actually kind of sounds nice to me, except that part of this punishment was that his lives that he would experience were all supposed to be, well, pretty awful. Still though, when facing off against Vandal Savage, even with Vandal's somewhat newfound powers, Batman won. I mean, you can be ancient and immortal, but that doesn't mean that you're immune from being beaten by Batman, right? Batman's got that plot armor, baby. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're doing here on Top 10 Nerd, and you love when I talk about supervillains, I know I do, be sure to check out our supervillains playlist over on the channel for even more good villainous content. Number 9, Surtur. Surtur is not someone we think of too often or even touch on, but he's a pretty big deal in the comics, and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, in the MCU, he successfully managed to destroy Asgard, fulfilling his prophesized role in Ragnarok. And what's more, Thor knew that this was what needed to be done in order to stop his sister Hela. So despite facing off against Surtur initially, he ended up having to be the one to free him so that the prophecy could actually be realized, sacrificing the place of Asgard in order to save the people of Asgard. In the comics, Surtur is an ancient foe, having been the sworn enemy of Odin for, well, pretty much forever. He hails from Muspelheim, and even for years successfully stopped Odin from achieving an alliance between the people of Odin's own Asgardian tribe, the Aesir, and the other Asgardian tribe known as the Vanir. Number 8, Circe. Circe is amazing. Definitely one of my favorite ancient villains around, possibly one of my favorite DC villains of all time around. Being that she is also the Circe from ancient Greek myth, I think you can understand just how old she is. Circe is known for being a powerful witch, and in the Prime Earth continuity was also revealed to be one of Hecate's witch marked. Her insane magical ability is how she has been able to survive for so long, without also appearing to have aged much at all. However, I will also add that in the New Earth continuity, this is also thanks to the fact that Circe is actually descended from Titans, which not only makes her immortal and ageless, but also pretty durable as well. Circe is known for being a powerful Wonder Woman foe, but despite the fact that Wonder Woman is really well known among comic fans, I feel like her villains get less time in the spotlight for, I don't know, for some reason, despite the fact that Wonder Woman actually has a pretty stacked rogues gallery all her own. And like Circe, many of them also seem to have a rich and interesting history. Seriously, I feel like Circe could just like have her own comic series. That's how much she has and has had going on throughout her life and throughout the comics. Number 7, Morgan Le Fay. Speaking of powerful witches, Morgan Le Fay is a villain we really don't get to showcase or focus on a lot on this channel, so I am taking this opportunity to remind you of just how ancient and how bad she is. Morgan Le Fay is a villain who hails originally from Arthurian legend and was adopted as a character in Marvel Comics all the way back in 1955, making her first appearance in Black Knight issue number 1. But of course, she's actually much older than 1955 in terms of her canon character history. Morgan Le Fay existed just after the ancient and mythical times of the island of Atlantis. In this version of the story, not all of the island was lost, and actually some islands that were part of Atlantis still existed, chiefly Avalon, which is where Morgan was was born. Unfortunately, the remaining isles of Atlantis would eventually also be drowned and swallowed up by the sea, causing Morgan, her mother, and the man who would become known as Merlin to flee to Britain. This all happened before the 6th century, with Morgan eventually temporarily becoming Merlin's apprentice. As a villain, Morgan has not only tormented the people of her own time period, but she has also traveled to the present day and threatened the people and heroes of that time as well. Number 6. Barbatos. Barbatos is the Bat God who basically helped Batman to become what he is today, but as part of his own dark machinations. At least, Barbatos claims to be that. According to Barbatos, he was the bat that appeared before Bruce the night that he decided to become Batman, inspiring the young Bruce Wayne to go on to don the cape and cowl, and becoming a major symbol for Batman. Barbatos was once the loyal ally of the World Forger. He was a dragon who would destroy worlds that were unstable, often built on fear, known as belonging to the Forge of Worlds. Barbatos, however, grew to enjoy destroying worlds so much that he actually decided to rebel against the World Forger so he could destroy more worlds, ultimately destroying his master, which allowed him to corrupt his Forge of Worlds, with it warping and ultimately becoming known by a name you might be more familiar with, the Dark Multiverse. Just as the World Forger is one of the oldest beings in the cosmos over at DC, so is his pet dragon gone rogue, Barbatos. Barbatos would go on to recruit others to his new purpose to destroy the main multiverse. Number 5. Joe Chill. While we didn't know who he was at the time, Joe Chill would go on to become a huge supervillain in Batman's life. He would be known to Bruce Wayne as the man responsible for the death of Batman's parents. Well, responsible. More, he was known as the perpetrator. The circumstances surrounding the murder of Martha and Thomas Wayne in regards to it being part of a great plot or just a random mugging gone wrong would continue to be explored even after we found out Joe Chill's name. Either way, Joe Chill has been a huge villain in Batman's life anyways, because he took away Bruce Wayne's parents, which is kinda Batman's whole thing. Number 4. The Monk. The Monk first appeared in Detective Comics issue number 31, shortly after Batman's first appearance a few issues previously. He is often dressed in red robes, but his first appearance also featured him wearing a red cloth bag with eye holes on his head, marked with a skull and crossbones. So stylish. This was way back when Bruce Wayne also had a fiancée named Julie. The Monk ends up hypnotizing and kidnapping Julie. Batman, however, ends up chasing him down and facing a castle filled with booby traps in order to save his fiancée, who does not know apparently that her betrothed Bruce is actually the Bat. The issue ends with Batman swearing vengeance, soaring off to Hungary to find the Monk and his werewolves? I just love that part because I'm always like, wait, what do you mean you're going after his werewolves? He has werewolves? What? Did we find that out in that issue? I don't remember that being mentioned, but maybe I forgot. Number 3. Dr. Death. While his New 52 appearance is terrifying, Dr. Death actually first appeared in Detective Comics Volume 1, issue number 29, and looked just like your average mad scientist guy. He was one of the first supervillains that Batman ever encountered and is often known as a producer of biological weapons. You know, evil mad science stuff. Like most of Batman's supervillains, he isn't superpowered himself. His first appearance saw him being apprehended by Batman only to go down in a blaze of flames, though at least Batman tried to stop him from going down in a blaze of glory by tossing a fire extinguisher at him. So helpful, Batman, thanks for that. Needless to say, this wouldn't be the end of Dr. Death, and we would definitely see him again. Now he's got that crazy bone serum that just makes bones grow everywhere. Used it himself, so he's got these crazy teeth. You should show them the picture. Number 2. Ultra Humanite. One of Superman's first foes before Lex Luthor even. I know, it's crazy. If you haven't noticed yet, comics both seemed to act as a celebration for science while also having an obsession for its less honorable uses via mad science, as we like to call it. That's its own category of science for you science nerds out there. Just kidding. I know mad science isn't an actual category, but it should be. Apparently old school views were that science is awesome but can also be super dangerous, which, I mean, true. Ultra Humanite's brand of mad science came in the form of body swapping. A brilliant mind trapped in a frail, old, crippled body, Geralt dreamed of setting himself free of his decrepit and failing body and conquering the world. Just normal dreams, you know how it is. Becoming Ultra Humanite, he is known for inhabiting various female bodies in the DC universe, including Tara's for a time. Kinda weird. And for inhabiting the body of an albino ape. Those are his things. He's into apes and swapping bodies with ladies. It's normal. It's fine. Number 1, Namor. The Submariner appeared even before Marvel was called Marvel. Well, now he is definitely more anti-hero, and he never really has been a bad guy when it comes to him as a character. He's definitely also a bit of a jerk with a dark side, even when he's acting heroically, which, not going to lie, is part of the reason that I think we all love him so much. He's just so complex. He can be anything he wants or anything he needs to be. A villain, a hero, an anti-hero. However, when he was first introduced in the Fantastic Four comics in issue number 4 of volume 1 in the early 60s, way after his initial introduction in April of 1939, I know, it was as a villain to the Fantastic Four. After remembering his life as Prince of the Sea, Namor returns to his lost home of Atlantis only to find that it had been destroyed by the radioactive pollution of atomic tests. He seeks vengeance, and the Fantastic Four must stop him as he aims to attack the land, destroying the city and causing harm to the land dwellers who he deems responsible for the destruction of his home. Which was very villainous at the time, but I feel like now a lot of us are cool with this because we're like, hey, you know, the ocean's real polluted, so like, yeah, fair enough. Also, they really did that. They really used to set off atomic bomb tests underwater. That's a thing that we did. Shame on us.
At number 10, we have Apocalypse. One of Earth's very first mutants, this immortal threat blurs the line between man and deity. Originally called En-Sabah-Nur, which translates either to the morning light or the seven lights, he was born in ancient Egypt, and after being abandoned by his tribe at birth on account of his monstrous physique, he was found and raised by a ruthless nomadic warrior tribe where he learned the principle that would guide him for the rest of eternity: that only the toughest, most ruthless and pitiless few would and should survive. And thanks to his mutant immortality, which comes from his ability to alter his own molecular structure at will, Nur was able to integrate his body with celestial technology over the eons, which basically uncaps his power level by allowing him to spontaneously bestow upon himself any superpower of his choosing whenever he wants, thus cementing Apocalypse as one of the most powerful ancient villains in comic history. And by the way, if you're digging the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. If you haven't done those things already, I'd really appreciate it if you did, because it helps me out. Thanks guys. At number 9, we have Circe the Weaver. Immortal witch and longtime enemy of the Amazons of Paradise Island, Circe is probably best known mythologically speaking as she who transforms people into animal hybrids, which she calls her Ani-Men. Though she sports a wide variety of many other magical abilities, a lot of which we won't be getting into today as they're all pretty typical for magic wielders, but I will mention her chronokinetic ability, allowing her to freeze temporal reality and pull herself and others out of the moment, a supremely useful and powerful ability. Alright, so how does one go about acquiring mastery over this awesome magic? Gods, naturally. See, Circe was once the princess of Colus, and after being wedded off to the heir of one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the land, she discovered that the dude was a brute, a drunk, and a liar. Arranged marriages, am I right? Anyways, she eventually capped him, which led to her being hunted by the dude's family until one day, lost and in exile, she was approached by the goddess Hecate, which bestowed upon her the Circle of the Witch Mark, representing 1/5 of Hecate's immortal soul, thus granting Circe mastery of magic by which she could fulfill her desires of dominance and revenge, and so began the legend of Circe the Weaver. At number 8, we have Kulan Gath. The sorcerer who would become Kulan Gath was once a young slave purchased by the original Kulan Gath, who was a sorcerer from the cruel kingdom of Stygia during the Hyborian era. Eventually, after withstanding years of abuse from his master, the boy ended up believing that Kulan intended to slay him, and so he decided to act first, if you catch my drift, by poisoning the mage and feeding his body to the pigs. The boy then took possession of the fallen sorcerer's magic library, and after mastering the magic, he went on to make the Kulan Gath name infamous for centuries to come. The mage would then go on to gruesomely defeat Murky Ra, the sorcerer supreme of his time, so you know we're dealing with some powerful magic here. Kulan's been slain and revived almost too many times to count, thus enabling him to persist across millennia. At number 7, we have Hela. As the Asgardian goddess of the unalived, and with strength considerably greater than most Asgardians and even matching that of Thor, Hela is undeniably one of the most dangerous ancient villains on this list. Fans of the MCU's Ragnarok will recognize her as Odin's daughter, but the comics actually allude to her being the daughter of Loki, Asgardian god of mischief. And even though the Nords warned warned Odin that Hela would prove to be a great threat to Asgard, Odin decides to make Hela goddess and ruler of the spirits of the unalive, as if that's gonna help him somehow. As Hela grew, she longed to bring more Asgardian souls under her control, especially that of Odin and Thor, and so she and her father Loki attempted to bring Ragnarok by eliminating Balder and then attacking Asgard with a horde of monsters. That is, until their plan was thwarted by Odin after he used his power to revive Balder. Guess that's why she decided to take out Odin first in the movie. At number 6 we have Mephisto. The origin story behind this primordial demon has been lost to time, as he's certainly older than any mortal who's ever existed. He's essentially every demon stereotype rolled into one, as he's the ruler of his own infernal dimension and often tries to get people to make soul bargains. As a matter of fact, it's thanks to these very deals that we're giving characters like Ghost Rider, the crew of the Flying Dutchman. Heck, he even directly instructed or inspired the wraths of terror brought on by the likes of Apocalypse and even Thanos. Marvel goes so far as to claim that it was Mephisto who disguised himself as a snake to get Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So remember kids, if a demon is offering you a deal that sounds too good to be true, it's cause it is. But hey, at least you're usually getting something of equal value back for your soul. I've seen more treacherous contracts from cell phone providers.
Number 5, Phalanx. I'm not actually sure what is more scary, the Phalanx or the race they're believed to come from, the Technarchy. The Phalanx's main goal is to eventually conquer and assimilate, so to speak, the entire universe. Now, how do they do this? As a technological race, they use a virus known as the techno-organic virus to infect the planets they come across and eventually use it to devour all organic life there and consume all information on the planet. This virus is the same as the one that Cable is infected with, or well, it's similar. He is sort of a variation or an evolution of the virus that they use. But they're both techno-organic viruses. Just not like completely identical. Number 4, Dormammu. An evil cosmic being, Dormammu is one of the most powerful foes in the Marvel Universe. Up until Thanos truly revealed himself, and maybe even after Thanos came to full Infinity Gauntlet power, really, Dormammu was the most powerful foe that we'd seen in the MCU. And odds are good he'll return at some point, given how powerful he is in the Marvelverse in regards to the comics. He's attempted to depose the Celestials, and at one point even tried to take on Eternity. Even if he didn't fare so well, just the idea of taking on Eternity is a big, scary deal. Eternity basically embodies the entirety of Earth 616 and is only surpassed in terms of authority by the Living Tribunal. So yeah, pretty serious business if you're taking on Eternity. That entity, I wouldn't want to mess with it. Number 3, Shuma-Gorath. Shuma-Gorath is one of the Great Old Ones and many Angled Ones, basically a Marvel version of an Elder God. Like Dormammu, he is also known as being one of the Lords of Chaos, although it's been unclear throughout the comic lore to tell if there are truly multiple Lords of Chaos or just one Lord who keeps being renamed throughout. This Many Angled One is known for being one of the oldest entities in the Marvel Universe. He has returned to Earth many times and set up as God there, being worshipped even on Earth before the sinking of Atlantis, where he demanded blood sacrifices. Sounds familiar. Sounds like someone else we heard of earlier. Are they the same person? Maybe. I don't know. Number 2, the Brood. These aliens are insectoid beings who reproduce through finding hosts on other planets whom they can implant with their offspring. Great, right? Do we love that? Yeah, basically, you get the picture. It's kind of like Alien, except instead of something bursting out of you, it hatches and then completely takes you over, inside and out, basically possessing your mind and your body and then just killing you in the process, so you're really no longer there. The Brood don't just do this to survive though, they actually enjoy the terror and horror that they cause among other species. They enjoy hurting and frightening others. It doesn't bother them, and to them it's even pleasant or amusing. Yeah, so scary. Number 1, Cancerverse. While the Cancerverse is an alternate Marvel universe, much of what we see of it involves a cosmic presence. Most of the important goings-ons in regards to stories involving it happen in outer space. The Cancerverse is a world where there is no death. Sounds nice, right? Think again. Without death to provide balance to the world, life was left without anything to hold it back, and as a result became a wild and evil thing, transforming into something like an Eldritch god or a monster. This all came to pass because the original Captain Marvel made a deal with the Many Angled Ones in exchange for them curing him of his cancer. The Many Angled Ones themselves is also pretty horrific.